will call the meeting to order and ask the secretary to please call the roll.
Director Schenk.
Here.
Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Assembly Member Arambula. Director Perea Sr.
Here.
Director Gametti.
Present.
Director Escutia.
Here.
Director Williams.
Here.
Senator Gonzalez. Director Cohen.
Here via Zoom.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Secretary. And we'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance if Director Escutia would lead us, please.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Escutia.
Chair Richards, if I could just add one more thing on the
Sure.
website issue. While our Zoom link is up, and if anybody out there wants to ensure others can participate, if they go to our pages on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter X, you will be able to find the link to the Zoom and be able to join the meeting. So anyone wants to share that with anyone that wants to participate,
Okay,
please do.
thank you. I started to say whatever all those things are, but okay. Okay. So with that, we'll now go to a public comment and ask our secretary to let the public know how they are able to address the board today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin public comment for the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called on in the order we received your card. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called on in the order their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chair, we will begin with the in-person speakers. Our first speaker is Keith Dunn.
Before you come forward, Mr. Dunn, we've got a room full here and we appreciate it, and we appreciate you all being here. Can I just see a show of hands, how many people are planning to speak this morning who are here in the room? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Dunn, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. Keith Dunn here on behalf of the California Building and Construction Trades Council, the Association of California High-Speed Trains. I want to take an opportunity really to just highlight the partnership that's existed between the trades and this organization since the beginning and building out the Central Valley. We're up to 13,000 jobs. I understand 900 small businesses. It's been a very successful partnership, one that has brought life-changing opportunities to the men and women in the building trades in the Central Valley. We're looking forward to continuing that partnership on this next procurement for Trainsets. And we have seen the transformational opportunities that are presented to our workers as they have the opportunity to participate in this project and bring the next level of transportation to California. Looking forward to continuing to support opportunities for additional funding, partnerships with other rails that may be coming into our state, and just very excited at this real pivotal point. I also want to take just a point of privilege to thank your CEO for his years of dedication in this project. We've had the opportunity to work together for a very long time, and I just wanted to thank him for his service publicly and acknowledge that the hard work that he's done to get us to this point. So with that, from the building trades, we look forward to the partnership continuing and moving forward, building the train sets together in the same type of partnership. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dung, and we appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Aaron Lahan.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. I brought some friends. I hope you don't mind. It's always better to come with friends, right? And I am going to be speaking with my brother Renee Cruz from the electrical workers. So we're just gonna take our 4 minutes together, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Erin Lahane, and I'm appearing on behalf of the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers. I'm joined today by our brothers and sisters from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers 1245 and some of the representatives from organizing committee at Siemens Sacramento. Together, we are Siemens Workers United. We have been working together for over a year on behalf of hundreds of concerned Siemens workers. We'd like first to express our enthusiastic continued support for the California high-speed rail. We have been longtime supporters, as we are confident that this project will transform California. And we are grateful to this board and to Mr. Kelly for the ongoing support of our brothers and sisters in the construction trades, 13,000 of whom have had the opportunity so far to work on this transformative project. We are here today to ask you to insist upon the same sort of workforce respect and partnership as you consider rolling stock procurement. Siemens, shortlisted to manufacture the high-speed train sets, has been fighting our efforts to represent their workforce in the Sacramento rolling stock facility. We've had to file several unfair labor practice violations, copies of which I've brought here today. Workers who merely want the opportunity to exercise their federally protected right to organize are being singled out and bullied. Just like the construction workers building the infrastructure for high-speed rail, these hardworking Siemens employers are just seeking the benefit of our state-of-the-art training programs, much needed workplace protection, and to be paid and treated fairly. And let me just underscore how important for safety purposes a long-term continuing real training program is, especially with train cars that travel at high speeds, carrying precious human cargo through our California communities. We have reviewed the procurement document and asked that this board consider requiring the two shortlisted bidders to submit robust and transparent workforce plans that truly address concerns these workers have, and to give us and the general public the opportunity to review and respond at a subsequent board meeting, and that no procurement award be granted until such time that these violations and concerns have been adequately heard and addressed, and that the workforce can enjoy being treated in a way that reflects California's high road labor standards. It would be a great disservice to these workers and the labor movement and all of the work that has been done in California to award such a high profile and significant procurement contract funded entirely by public money to a company that does not respect its workforce or the great partner organized labor has been to the state of California and the high-speed rail. Like I am sure all of you do, we hope these trains can be built and maintained in California. But foremost, we must ensure that the workers are driving this train and not left behind. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Renee.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Good morning, Renee Cruz Martinez with IBW Local 1245. I am here today with the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers and the workers at Siemens Workers United. Ask that we make sure that we're giving manufacturing workers the kind of high road jobs that California has been doing as part of its transition to clean energy economy. This is state policy, and we have done this successfully for workers in most sectors. Manufacturing remains stuck in the mud, and you as a high-speed rail board can help fix this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Our next speaker is Elmer Lizardi.
Good morning and welcome, Mr. Ligardi.
Good morning, Elmer Lizardi here on behalf of the California Labor Federation. The California Labor Federation has been a strong supporter of the California high-speed rail project for over 2 decades now, and we are excited to see that progress has been made. HSR has already created 13,000 good union jobs in construction and will create thousands more in the Central Valley and beyond. The HSR Authority and this board has signed historic agreements to ensure that the construction and operations jobs use highly skilled union workers through project labor agreements, and the recent memorandum of understanding with rail unions. We would like to echo the previous comments being made, and we want to ensure that the board uses similarly high labor standards for the jobs building HSR train sets. The state is now poised to invest billions of taxpayer dollars to manufacture trains, and we want to ensure that the RFP includes requirements that lead to high quality jobs in California. We thank the board for including the U.S. employment plan as part of the RFP. But to be effective, we want the weight of the U.S. EP within the scoring system to be increased. We also want to urge for further steps to be taken, including increased transparency and public input into the plans to make sure that our investment in high-speed rail not only builds trains, but also builds the middle class. We look forward to working with you all to make sure the high-speed rail is up and running in California. Thank you so much for the partnership.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Gerald Lebain. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Our next speaker then is Sealy.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Kelly, members of the general public. I'm joined by my board members today. My name is Sealy, CEO of the Boys and Girls Club. I have with me Rosa Kindred Windsor, as well as Rob Babty. Again, my name is C, and before I came to be the CEO for the Boys and Girls Club, I actually served as a marketing and consulting outreach person for the San Joaquin Joint Powers of Authority and getting local support for the morning expansion of the 7th daily round trip from Fresno to Sacramento some years ago, as well as support for the ACE expansion, assist with the coordination of high-speed rail community meetings in Merced and in the Los Banos area, and also gain support for the transit and intercity rail capital program. So I am very well aware of the work of the high-speed rail. I'm in support of it. Today, I'm here on a very different purpose. Interestingly, the facility that I am currently located in will be directly impacted by the high-speed rail in the Merced area. I'm here asking for the authority's support and assisting us with resources to relocate our organization as we are highly impacted, not in the next few years, but currently. We cannot get a multi-year lease because we've been told that high-speed will be coming in, which makes it very difficult as an organizational leader to plan for our families that we serve every single year. It's like, well, like I share with my board, a mom that's trying to provide for a family, not knowing if you're going to have a home every single year. So again, I'm asking for your support in relocating our organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, and we'll have our management look into this and work with you to make sure that the resources that can be available from our activities are made sure that you are clear of those, about those. But so thank you very much. Okay.
Our next speaker will be Rob Babty.
Good morning. Pardon me. As she said, my name is Rob Babty. I'm a member of the Boys and Girls Club of Merced, who was we're celebrating our 30th year in the community of Merced. Boys and Girls Club's been around since 1860. Maybe some of you participated in it. Maybe some of you were members. If you weren't, I was. So I came up in that organization. Right, ended up, as a service member, a community leader. I run a nonprofit now. I'm helping out another. Really, I just want to kind of highlight the impact of the Merced extension will displace us from our current facility, as C highlighted. And so really, we're just here today to kind of raise your guys' awareness of that although there's great growth, there comes great responsibility in that growth. And in that growth, we're going to be displaced. And so we're really just trying to begin a dialogue with y'all that if there's any sort of financial assistance, granting, even just community extension as we go out into the community to look for a new home. Your ability to offer that to us is going to be super impactful. Merced, if you don't know, is a community that's economically repressed. You know, it's a 65% state or federal subsistence community. There's not a lot of economic opportunity, and in that, the children within that community need a place to go, and we, for a lot of them, provide that place. And so any awareness, extension, warm welcoming, anything that you can do to help us extend our arm out in the community as the project grows near to that Merced extension would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I just warn folks, there's an orange Tyrannosaurus Rex on the loose out here in front. Just watch your footing. You may buy it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rosa Windsor.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Again, everything has been shared with my colleagues here this morning. However, I would simply like to add to the conversation that the Boys and Girls Club of Merced County is not opposed to this project. We very much welcome forward-moving progress in our community. We want to instill in our club members that they will grow into responsible community members and be positive change agents in our community. We do not oppose the project. It just hurts that it is in our backyard. Also, we just want that the organization be mindful, or the agency, excuse me, this agency be mindful that we are a youth service organization that will be removed from our current location, where we have expanded our capacity to be able to serve not just youth within the city limits of Merced, but we are true to our name, and we have expanded throughout the county in 4 other communities as well. So there is a great sense of urgency and planning on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club to relocate. And we certainly would appreciate a partnership of some kind in trying to make that happen, to continue the work that we have begun 30 years ago, so we can continue it in 30 years more to come. So thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, and we with you. I can only tell you that as you look around this board, you can be assured that each of the board members here are very much engaged in how we interact with the public and the people that we affect with this project. And it will not, your comments are not lost on us, and we will be following up.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Mr. Chair, we will now move to Zoom participants. Once again, if you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, press the number 2. This will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called on in the order their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have at least 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chairman, our first speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Secretary. Can you tell me how many people that you're showing?
2.
How many?
2.
Wonderful. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Our first speaker is Frank Quintero.
Mr. Quintero, good morning.
Good morning, Chair Richards and board members. The business plan clearly demonstrates the progress made and to be made on the high-speed rail project. Certainly want to say thank you to CEO Kelly, the HSR staff, and all the crew involved in building high-speed rail phase 1. It's exciting to drive Highway 99 and to see high-speed rail coming to fruition. And really, it's an opportunity that I had recently to brag about at a site selectors meeting on the East Coast, being the first state in the country that will be having a high-speed rail facility. The city of Merced is excited for the future that high-speed rail brings, and we encourage you to adopt the 2024 business plan. And again, we appreciate the partnership and the opportunity to be able to work with your staff on bringing high-speed rail to the city of Merced. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Our next speaker is Emily Gartenberg.
Hello, good morning.
Good
My
morning and
name-
welcome.
Thank you. My name is Emily Gartenberg with Jobs to Move America. First, I want to thank the board for adopting the U.S. employment plan in this RFP. As many speakers before me have rightly pointed out, the authority has an incredible opportunity to establish strong job standards to improve job quality, especially in manufacturing roles, which we know oftentimes and too often do not have strong quality like the wages and benefits and treatment that we all want to see for the workers who are powering our transition to a clean economy and building much needed infrastructure in the state. We really appreciate the U.S. employment plan being a part of this RFP, but we would really encourage the board to increase the scoring. Right now, 2% or 20 points out of 1,000 is a great start, but it isn't enough to be a strong signal to companies that they need to improve their job performances in order to be competitive for these really important bids that, as another speaker pointed out, are entirely taxpayer funded. So again, we really want to thank the board for your leadership on adopting the USEP and encourage you to increase the scoring to really make this count. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have no other attendees that wish to give comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. I understand. Yes, Director Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was related to one of the prior the commenters who we had here present from Boys and Girls Club of Merced. I know we'll work directly with them on their specific issue, but Mr. Kelly, could you just talk about what we do in terms of relocation when we have properties that have these impacts, just so we have a general sense of what that looks like. And then obviously when, would love to hear back from you how their particular issue was resolved down the line.
Yeah, so first on the specifics of the Boys and Girls Club in Merced, let me, our staff, our real property folks and our right-of-way folks will track that. I'll report back to the board on where that is. But as a general matter, we fall under the Uniform Relocation Act. Any impacted property, we access and help relocate business entities. I think the best example, the place we've done this the best is in and around Fresno, where we had a commitment with the local EDC to make sure that 85% of the businesses were relocated, stayed in the city of Fresno, and we achieved that. Some wanted to move outside of the Fresno bounds, and we accommodated that as well. So typically we go through that process and make resources available to make sure that businesses are relocated appropriately. And that's what we've done throughout this. Again, I'll work closely with our right-of-way folks and our real property folks to give you more on the specifics of the Boys and Girls Club in Merced.
Thank you. And I would just echo the remarks of our chairman in that we are focused on this. It's important that as we build this system, that we maintain positive relationships and partnerships throughout the state. And I think what you just said, Mr. Kelly, is reassuring to know that we've done it, we'll continue to do it, and hopefully we'll do it in a way that makes sense for that organization in Merced. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think Mr. Williams echoes the sentiments of everyone on this board in that matter. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Comments? Okay, thank you. We'll move on now, ladies and gentlemen, to our agenda for this meeting, April the 11th, 2024. Item number 1 is the approval of our February 29th board meeting minutes. Is there a motion for approval? We have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Assemblymember Arambula, Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gometti, Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Aye.
Senator Gonzalez, Director Cohen.
Aye.
This motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 2, ladies and gentlemen, is the consideration of the adopting of the 2024 business plan and capital cost estimates policy for the annual reports. So with that, our CEO, Brian Kelly, will make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Brian Kelly, Chief Executive Officer of the California High Speed Rail Authority.
Microphone.
I'll try. I'm 6'4", man. All right.
Yeah, really. It would seem after all this time, we could have a longer handle on these things, but.
All right, I'll do my best. Mr. Chairman, I'll jump right in. I think
Please.
as a threshold matter, I'll just say that you all recall we gave a presentation to the board on February 9th about the release of the draft, or the February meeting about the release of the draft business plan which was released on February 9th. That kicked off the 60-day comment period. That comment period included 2 legislative hearings, one in the Senate, one in the Assembly on March 11th and 12th. So we worked through that process. We've had a lot of interaction with our Inspector General's office about elements of the business plan, mostly in making sure that it's as transparent and very clear on some of the challenges and opportunities we have in front of us, and that we're stating that in the most, as I said, transparent way possible. So this presentation will just go through some of the differences between the draft plan and where we are now. I'll point out some page numbers to members if you have the business plan with you that you can flip to and see where we made some of those changes. So with that, let me just go right through this. Next slide, please. Again, this business plan is required under the law, Public Utilities Code, Section 185033, which is every 2 years. The 22 business plan was included limited updates to forecasts at the time. Remember that COVID impacted the release date of the final 2020 business plan into 2021. So the 22 updates were more limited. I would say during COVID, generally, we had a bit of a squishing together, if you will, of business plans that are typically a little bit more spread out. In the 2023 was our major project update report. That was a major shift and update and really revision of cost and forecast and estimates. And that was released just 10 months before we released the draft 2024 business plan. So much of what was in the project update report is the basis of the information that's in the 2024 business plan. That project update report provided more time for us to work through forecasts and estimates. A keystone document relayed the foundation of the work going forward. We updated our cost and schedule estimates for Merced and the Bakersfield segment, and we specified Merced to Bakersfield segment would be built as a dual-track electrified railroad with a shared station in Merced. At about the time we adopted that plan, the legislature adopted statute that made that the highest priority for our work at this time. The 2024 business plan notes really the significant program progress since the release, just 10 months or prior, of the 2023 project update report. It's still aligned with the 2023 with respect to schedule, budget, and vision for the project, and also updated much of the significant progress we made during 2023, including the receipt of some $3.3 billion in federal funding, particularly the $3.1 billion Fed state grant we received in December. And then we also had expansive discussion. We have expansive discussion in this document about risk management and mitigation. Next slide. Again, just going through the schedule quickly, February 9th, we released this plan. We held a board meeting and took public comment on it on February 29th. 2 legislative hearings, one in the Assembly, one in the Senate on March 11th and 12th. We closed the public comment period just a couple of days ago on April 9th, and we're now here before the board to present the proposed revisions to the business plan and seek adoption so we can release the final business plan to the legislature by the statutorily required date of May 1st. Next slide. The documents in the business plan and the documents that you have in your binder, they really summarize the proposed changes between the draft plan and this final plan. Members have in their background material and binders, staff recommended edits to the tables, or the edits table of proposed substantive text edits. These are largely some of the key public comments that we heard back. Many of them are reflective of work we did directly with our Inspector General. And again, many of those comments were relative to greater transparency and being more clear on certain opportunities and challenges that we are working through as we go forward. We have an errata table that's also in the members' background, and that errata table is really about technical, grammatical, technical typo kind of things that we fixed in the report. And the revised 24 business plan incorporates both those staff recommendations and the edits. I apologize that this slide says 2022 business plan, but the 2024 business plan incorporates those edits and the errata in the updates. Just so you know, broadly on public comments, we received some 51 comments as of April 2nd over the course of roughly 60 days, and 4 letters of support in that same time. Next slide. Some of the key changes, and again, I'll direct members by page number if you want to take a look at them as we go. You'll see many of the key changes that we made reflect work that we did closely with our Office of Inspector General. In Chapter 3, under the current funding section on page 64 of the document, there was a recommendation. And so we added a new table that identified the target dates for future funding and included the best fit federal grant programs. This was important because we had prior listed where we were and where we intend to be on receiving federal funds, but this had us align that with the timing of our schedule. So we put in the best sort of timeline to receive those funds for us to stay on the construction window between 2030 and 2033 for the entirety of the 171-mile stretch. Also in Chapter 3 in the federal funding section, in response to an OIG recommendation, we added narrative on the authority's confidence level to receive funds from Prop 1A, cap and trade, federal grants, and local funding. And just to recap that, that's on page 67 in the document. And just to recap that, obviously on Prop 1A, our confidence is extremely high. Brian Annis reported earlier, we're now into the final $2.2 billion of Prop 1A dollars. Bonds were just issued against those funds. And so we're now into the very end of the bond fund. Cap and trade has been vibrant and consistent in the last couple of years. And so we're now bringing in between $1 billion and $1.25 billion annually from cap and trade. So we're confident there. You know, on federal funds, there's just really no other way to say it. Our level of confidence is high with working with the current administration. Should that change in November, level of confidence will change a bit. But as things stand right now, we have a very high level of confidence in working with our federal partner. In fact, it's never been better. Also in Chapter 3 on page 66, we clarify that the authority does not have any current financial commitments to shared corridor projects. And again, the reason we made the shift in narrative there, we listed a series of projects that are locally sponsored, but they also have joint benefit opportunities for both the local sponsor and us. But that got confused with whether or not we were committing funds to those projects. We were not, so we clarified that in this section. On private sector funding, there was a request to provide more details on the authority's plans to issue a request for expressions of interest, or the RFEI, which we are interested in putting out later in this year. That's on page 68. And so we updated the narrative in that area. Those are really some of the key and the most substantive updates that we made between the draft document and the final document. A couple of other things. There was a technical update to a chart where we had added a line on page 54. There's a funding expression and then a line on total expenditure. And so we just had a wrong number in. Instead of saying 6.8 billion, when we minus one from the other, we said 7. So we have to change it back to 6.8. Very technical, but a change that we're making. We updated some of the language on our quality and safety section on page 10, just to reflect that the quality work we do is an ongoing commitment. We're seeking BCP and other resources to continue our quality oversight work. And on page 4 in environmental clearance language, we deleted a sentence that was on page 4 we wrote that sentence and put it back in the document on page 17. We just thought it made more sense under that section. So we now have the draft before the board for discussion, and we hope adoption so we can move it to the legislature. There's one other item that I want to comment on, which is also at the request of the Office of Inspector General. You know, we've been very clear with you all, with the public, and with the policymakers in the legislature, how and when we do our updates for cost estimates. And what we try to do, as we've talked about before here, is for the work outside of the valley. I mean, when we're in the valley, it's already through environmental, it's already through design, we're in construction. We know a lot about that cost range. Outside of the valley, where we're going to San Francisco, we're going to the Los Angeles Basin, we're just finishing that environmental work. And so those cost estimates are done slightly differently. And what our practice has been is we want to update those estimates outside when we achieve a major milestone that shows we got more work behind us and we know more. For example, as we talked about here before, when we complete the environmental document, because at that point we've picked an alignment, it's 15% designed roughly. We've identified mitigation costs. If we've had to change the alignment to accommodate a community, it's reflected in the environmental document. And we've seen big cost swings in the environmental process. And so we update the costs in the business plan after that work is completed for outside the valley. So we also have, as we're asking you to adopt the business plan, the OIG suggests that we also ask that the board approve how we perform the cost estimates. 3 key elements are there. There are that we release the updated capital cost estimates at the appropriate time for the various project elements as work has reached a sufficient level to provide a meaningful update. That gets back to the environmental work being done. We use industry norms for cost estimating methodologies, and we use inflation and escalation estimates from credible and appropriate sources. In our case, DOF is a source for some of that inflation numbers, and also the federal government, the Federal Reserve is also a source. And we also include actual costs from the most recent quarter and financial reporting. All of our cost estimating information is outlined on pages 90 to 95 of the business plan. So as part of the adoption of the business plan, we also want to adopt the process for how we update the cost estimates, and that's at the recommendation of our Office of Inspector General. Next slide, please. Again, just some of the highlights that I touched on in February, talked a lot to the legislature about in March, and we'll just touch on here. Again, we have established a renewed and important partnership with the federal government. In 2023, we received $3.3 billion to advance this project. We are progressing in procurements that are really important to the FRA. I've had numerous conversations with the FRA since we've gotten the awards about the importance of getting those federal dollars to work. Part of the next agenda item is a part of that process, moving the federal funds we received and getting them to the streets. Our first construction package in the Central Valley is near completion. Construction jobs now exceeded 13,000 in the Central Valley. We exceeded our goals that we expressed publicly for percentage of right-of-way parcels acquired and the number of utilities that we relocated in the calendar year. And we met our contract milestones, keeping designs for the extensions to Merced and Bakersfield on schedule. Next slide. Looking forward, and as we look to the 2025 project update report, that will include details on the advancements toward our train set procurements, continued progress on the Central Valley construction packages, revised costs following environmental clearance of the remaining project segments in Southern California. Models and data on Central Valley service ridership will be complete and updated in that report as well. With that, members, I'll conclude my presentation here and happy to answer any questions.
And Chair Richards, if I could
Yes.
just interrupt and let everyone know that our website is back up. And so we are back
Great,
to
thank you.
full force. Thanks.
Thank you. The website is back up. Are there any questions for CEO Kelly on the 2024 business plan?
I have a few.
Yes, please, Director Correa.
Thank you, Brian, for your presentation. And first, reading over the business plan, I think it's appropriate to really thank staff for all the hard work that they've done to get us where we are today. And Brian, under your leadership, making some changes that needed to be made. It's a pretty detailed report. What I want to just ask some questions on and focus on is on page 26. And thank you for, I know I requested at the last meeting that we be a little more clear in terms of what our plan is to achieve the timelines to achieve our goals. And that is on page 26, just so I am clear. First question is based on the money that we have today, including our federal grant and all, we have enough money to complete the 119 miles section.
Yeah, so under the federal dollars that we have right now, we certainly have enough, including the single track for the 119.
119.
Yes, the federal government did not fund the second track on the 119 yet. We will continue to find resources for that. The other trend that's happening that might make that potentially not necessary for federal funds is cap and trade continues at the pace it's at. And we're advancing all the other work. We may be able to cover that second.
And that's an issue too, whether, with working with the legislature to extend cap and trade.
Yes.
Okay. And so our hard commitment to the public is to complete 119 miles based on funding that we have. And Merced to Bakersfield, I know we talked about 2033 possibly, but that's more aspirational at this point than actually being able to say we have the funding to perform.
As a management matter, we are working hard to get in service between Merced and Bakersfield by 2033. That's our outside envelope window.
I understand.
It is primarily contingent on the timing and availability
of funds.
Right.
And if I remember correctly,
we also have, I'm sorry.
Is that about 7 billion short of?
That's correct. That's correct.
To get the tower. Okay. Now, I understand the FRA, our grant deadline ends in 2028 to complete the 119 mile segment, which includes the tracking systems.
Yeah, under the ARA grant agreement we have with the federal government, we have construction completion date at the end of 2028.
Correct.
And a full, what I would call 119 mile operational segment, meaning it's ready for operations by the end of 2030.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So now looking at this timeline here, I just want to be clear, because I think what the public is most, I think, interested in, as well as the legislators and our federal partners. I think we all have interaction with them at different levels. And I think folks are saying perform. And I know we're all focused on performance. So obviously the other side of that coin, at least from my perspective, is making sure that we do not miss deadlines in any of our procurements. And as we complete construction in CP 1, 2, and 3. And maybe living in that area for so many years, since day one, we see it on a day-to-day basis. And we know the challenges that are there. Some things we can't control, like UP or, folks who are not responders in the timely manner. But I think it's just very important that, one, the state legislature and our federal partners understand that this timeline that we have on 26 on the different completion dates, that's something that I believe this board will and should hold itself accountable to. But to do that, we're going to need continued interaction with you and your staff to make sure that if we're getting close to a point where we're going to have slippage, that we know about it beforehand so that we can pivot, as opposed to just, coming to a meeting and saying we missed it.
Right.
And now we have, we have to extend our deadline. So
on that point in the F&A committee earlier, we report to the F&A committee where we are on terms of structures and guideway completed. Director Gilmetti asked at that committee this morning that we also include in that our estimate date to complete all the guideways and all the structures, and we'll be reporting that each month to the F&A going forward, so that the end dates on all of these.
Yeah.
What we have said about the business plan and where we are today, the construction of the segments in the Central Valley in the 2023 we estimated a completion date in 2026, and that is what's driving us. We are staying on that.
Yeah.
That completion.
Yeah.
Date.
Thank you, Brian. And I think some members have said the F&A, I think there's a lot of good information goes there, but the challenge is it doesn't go to the full board other than the packet that we receive. And it's a different dynamic when you're in front of a group having a discussion about, the project and what's happening, as opposed to not discussing it here as a full board. So this is just a continuing challenge. But my point simply is thank you for this timeline. I hope the legislature and our federal partners and the public pays attention to this timeline and holds us accountable just as we're gonna hold ourselves.
I mean, I'll tell
And-
you, it'll be in the next plan. It'll be the plan after that. too.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
this
understand,
is- this is the-
understood.
This is our timeline.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our CEO? Yes, Vice Chair Miller.
I was going to move the item.
Okay, none? Nothing? All right, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought I moved the item.
Yes, okay, and do we have a second? We
Second.
have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards.
Yes?
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Happily, yes.
Assemblymember Arambula. Director Perea Senior,
Yes.
Director Gometti.
Yeah.
Director Escutia,
Aye.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Senator Gonzalez, Director Cohen.
Aye.
And
We
so that is the adoption of resolution HSR 24-04.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you.
Yes, thank
Thank you, Brian.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move on to item number 3 on today's agenda, which is the consideration of providing approval for the release of a request for proposals for the for a supply maintain contract for high-speed rail train sets and related services. Mr. Armistead, good morning.
As was mentioned, I'm here to ask for your permission to release the request for proposals for the high-speed train sets and related services. Next slide, please. The agenda for my discussion, I'll talk a little bit about the board actions in the past. I'll talk about the RFQ results from the previous actions. I'll review the shortlisted offers. I'll talk about the RFP scope, evaluation, key dates, and then I'd like to answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. So I'm only seeking approval to release the RFP. I'm not asking for an execution of any contract at this time. The issuance of the request for proposals for high-speed train sets and related services. I'm asking for your authorization for staff to make changes to the RFP as part of the process. We'll return to the board for approval to award the contract and issue the first 2 notices to proceed, which I'll review in a few minutes, in late 2024. Then I'll return to the board for subsequent NTP approval. Next slide, please. So in the past, we released the RFQ in August of 2023. 2 offers submitted SOQs, statements of qualifications, in November. We completed our reviews of those SOQs in December of 2023. We found both SOQs fully responsive. Both offerers were shortlisted and will be invited to submit proposals if this item is approved today. And the offers are Alstom Transportation and Siemens Mobility. Next slide, please. A little bit about the shortlisted offers. They have experience and a presence here in the United States, and they build rolling stock for a variety of transit properties throughout the country. They're experts in rolling stock delivery relative to passenger equipment, ranging from streetcars and the light rail vehicles that you see here in town to high-speed rail train sets. They're internationally recognized and have significant experience in the design, manufacture, delivery, and maintenance of high-speed train sets. And they have been key participants in industry efforts related to the development of the regulatory language for FRA Tier 3 train requirements. And what happens is there's a group of folks called the Engineering Task Force and RSAC who inform the notice of proposed rulemaking for Tier 3 train sets and any changes to
the CFRs as it relates to delivery of rolling stock and other technical issues related to railroads. So this group includes rolling stock manufacturers and other suppliers, along with railroad properties and engineering consultants, et cetera. And some of our team participate in the RSAC and the ETC, Engineering Task Force, ETF. Next slide, please. So the scope of this is for the procurement of 6 train sets, which is a small order, 6 sets, operating at 220 miles an hour until we get tested. 10% above that, it's 242. The 2 prototypes to support static and dynamic testing and trial running, we'd like to be delivered in sometime in 2028. And that will help us to meet our requirements for meeting the grant agreement responsibilities. 4 production train sets to support revenue service will be delivered after that. And what we do with the prototype train sets is you run them through, do dynamic testing and static testing, and then we perform what's called field modifications, and they also make adjustments to the design. Those adjustments to the design are then communicated back to the factory, and then the factory adjusts the design for the production train sets. And then we get our production train sets for revenue service. In order to meet our goals, as was mentioned, and continue the momentum, we need to have this contractor under contract by this year. I'm looking at third, fourth quarter of this year. The procurement also includes the delivery of a driving simulator for training and train set spares. And there's a 30-year maintenance period for train set maintenance, inclusive of a midlife overhaul. During the maintenance period, the successful supplier will be subject to our MOU with labor. And that requires them to follow the Railway Labor Act and Railroad Retirement. So we have 13 labor organizations that we've signed an MOU with for the maintenance period of 30 years that will be maintaining these train sets. These train sets will be funded, as was mentioned earlier, 80% of the value by the FRA's Federal State Partnership Grant. So it's an 80-20 match for us. So 80% of the funding comes from the recently awarded FRA partnership grant. Next slide, please. More about the scope. It will be, as I mentioned, a supply and maintain agreement. This agreement is intended to cover the whole life of the train set. So they'll be required to meet performance-based requirements, the design and manufacture, delivery, and integration, testing, and commissioning of all the train sets. Maintenance for 30 years, as I mentioned, whole life maintenance, including the midlife overhaul and provision of spares, which means interchangeable parts for the train sets. Design, manufacture, installation for the testing, commissioning, and maintenance of the train sets and the updating of the driving simulator. Development and provision of design criteria for to inform interfaces with facilities, track systems, and stations. For example, this contractor will be required to give us the design requirements for the inside of the maintenance facility. So they'll tell us where the pit tracks go. They'll tell us where the mezzanines will be so that they can service the catenary and other on top of other equipment on top of the train sets. They'll inform us on crane sizes, drop tables for bogie replacement, wheel turning machines. So they'll lay that out in the most efficient manner so that they can efficiently maintain the train sets. They're going to participate in testing and commissioning for the facilities, track systems, and the stations. They'll develop and provide information to support the certification and subsequent commissioning of the train sets. So as they go through the design, we will be receiving test plans that will be working with the regulatory agency in this country is FRA. We'll be working with FRA to come up with the right test plan so that we can efficiently certify the train sets. The operations and maintenance of the equipment needed to maintain the train sets in the HMF to be built by others. So as I mentioned, they will help us with laying out the facility for heavy maintenance. Light maintenance we'll be doing at one location along with the heavy maintenance, which will be the overhaul and other heavy maintenance, midlife operation or midlife maintenance operations.
What
Next
does,
slide,
what does
please.
that mean? They will help us. They will help us with laying out the.
Part of their contract is to tell us where the pit track should go inside the facility, where the crane should go, where the wheel trimming machine should go, where the drop table should go. So as we work through the design of the maintenance facilities, they will say, put the crane over here, put the stores over there where we store the parts, put the wheel trimming machine at a certain location, put the mezzanines in a certain place so that they can do maintenance on the catenary, the pantograph. And usually air conditioning units are also on top of the trains.
At what point in this process or in the process will we be making a decision on where facilities will be placed? I know we've talked about light maintenance facilities and all, but.
Yeah, that's not part of this
I understand,
RFP.
but
Yeah,
at
yeah.
what point will we make those decisions?
Uh,
So that they can do their work.
Just on that process, we're in the environmental review process now for the location of the heavy maintenance facility, and that will conclude in 25.
So this group or this contract could not do any work with respect to the heavy maintenance facility until that's been determined?
I mean, components of what needs to be inside of a heavy maintenance facility,
that can be
yes,
done.
but at a specific location, not until we're into 25.
Thank you.
Next slide, please.
Can we just, for one moment, since we asked that another question, so with regards to the 30 years, how's that determine the 30-year life? Is it on cycles? Is it on hours of operation? When somebody's committing to the maintenance for 30 years, how do we know that the train set life is 30 years?
It's based on the mileage of the service plan. We have both revenue miles and non-revenue miles. And with high-speed train sets with high-speed train sets is based on mileage. With conventional rails, usually based on time, but it's going to be based on mileage.
Not cycles, not hours, but just on mileage.
Right. And we've done the calculations to determine if when we run the valley-to-valley service, we'll have these many revenue miles, these many non-revenue miles, and you combine those and say midlife overhaul should happen at this point in time. And then we've converted that we've done a calculation, and it looks like in between 13 and 16 years into the train set's life, we will have to cycle them into the heavy maintenance facility to do overhauls. So as we do our equipment manipulations to provide the service, we've gotten a number of train sets that allow us to always have at least one in maintenance and one hot standby. So as we cycle them through to do the midlife overhaul, we'll have the one that's going through midlife will be the one that we've already anticipated to be in maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have a hot standby somewhere out on the road, and then we'll continue to run our service. And then when it's time for the next train set, we put the old one, the one that has already been overhauled, into revenue service, and we take one out of revenue service, and now that's my maintenance train set.
So the implications then, as we grow the project, not only for phase 1, but phase 2, how is that also then calculated in the miles that each train set will be going, as opposed to just valley to valley?
We've done it all the way to phase 1, but we haven't done it all the way to phase 2. So we haven't done complete service planning for phase 2. So the mileage on the train sets, we will do that at a point in time. And so right now, I'm asking to release the RFP for 6 train sets. And I'll talk a little bit about in a few slides, I'll talk a little bit about the option orders. And then as we move through the process, you all will decide when the time is right, when we renew the fleet or buy more fleet for phase 1 or valley to valley.
If that being the case, we have to be concerned with how many miles the new fleet is actually going to be utilizing or building over its lifetime, making an assumption that it's going longer distances. Is that?
That's correct. That's correct. And I'll come back.
For these first train sets for these 30 years, these first 6 sets will be limited to not more than valley to valley? in order to have a maintenance contract that is for 30 years?
Yeah, that, at this point in time, yes, that's the way we foresee it. So the whole life maintenance of the train set is based on the mileage that we expect the train sets to achieve during their whole
So
life.
obviously, we've got to monitor that, so we know that these 6 sets don't go beyond valley to valley in order to have a maintenance contract that is actually viable for 30 years.
Yeah, yes. And there is a scenario where if we were to start the valley to valley service,
Mhm.
we could incorporate these 6 train sets into that service. We could if it was built.
Mhm.
And then my equipment manipulations would get more complicated because I now have these 6 along with the 15 needed for valley to valley, or the additional 15 needed for valley to valley, which gives me 21 train sets. So some train sets will go from San Francisco all the way to Bakersfield. And then when it's time for them to get their 2-day inspection, you have to make sure that that train set's in the right place so that it comes off the road at the end of its revenue service day and goes into the maintenance facility for its 2-day inspection. And then the other ones come out. So you have these equipment manipulations that will inform, that are informed by the maintenance requirements and the inspection requirements of the vehicle.
Okay. Complicated.
It does get very complicated. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, please.
First of all, Mr. Armistead, did you already report on page 8 of your presentation? Because that's where I would like to ask my questions.
Page 8.
I think that was the last page you were on.
Okay, let's
Yeah, that one.
okay. No, I was just gonna go through this slide. Hopefully I'll answer your question in my
Sure.
discussion.
Go ahead.
The 566, 533.68, as I mentioned, is federally funded on an 80-20 split for us. It'll include the 6 train sets and the driving simulator. The NTPs will be, as you see there, identification of critical interfaces, the mobilization of engineering and design services. And this is to inform, as we mentioned, the maintenance facility layouts and other design issues that relate to the train set for integration with us, with our other works. The 2 prototype train sets for static and dynamic testing, hoping to have them here on time for our static and dynamic testing in 2028, which is part of one of our funding agreements. The 4 production train sets for revenue service are in this contract, along with the spares that I mentioned, which are interchangeable parts. For NTP2, that's the driving simulator, and I'll come back to you for release of those 2 NTPs when we select one of the shortlisted offerers. NTP3 is the delivery of the option order that I mentioned of the 15 additional train sets. We do not have to execute this order. There will be conditions in the contract that say when this needs to be executed if we're going to buy the 15 train sets for the valley to valley service. Commencement of the overall train set service period, I'll come to you when it's time to execute that one. That includes planning and coordination efforts related to the midlife overhaul. And the commencement of the midlife overhaul, I'll also come to you with that one. So board approval will be required for all of these NTPs. The first 2 I foresee coming to you when I come with the selected offer from the RFP I'm asking you for permission to release.
All right, thank you. I'd like to ask some questions on this because this to me is the most important page of your presentation. This
Okay.
is the dollars and cents.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have 533.68 million for 6 train sets and the driving simulator. Can you segregate those funds and tell me exactly of that money, how much is it for 6 train sets and how much money is it for the driving simulator?
Yes, I can. For NTP1, we have 516 million. Let's see here. No, that's the history of the train sets. The NTP prices based on the proposal of successful offer. NTPs 1 and 2 will be based on the price proposals, including escalation. And the breakdown that I have for both NTPs, and I did receive that information before.
Well, okay.
Thank you.
What's the price for the driving simulator?
516 for the train sets, and the remaining
And the
17 million is
17
for the
driving
simulator. Yes.
Got it. And so then the 533 million only includes NTP 1 and NTP 2.
That's correct.
So I'm going to put a line right there, because after that, NTP 3 is an option,
That's
which means
correct.
that whoever wins this contract, whether it's Alston or Siemens, will also have an option to deliver an additional 15 train sets. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so 6, we really need to focus on that for the board as to the amount of money that we're talking about here. So for 6 train sets, it's 516 million, 15 train sets, somebody do the math, over $1 billion, $1.5 billion, all right?
And
But
those, Martha, will have to be approved by the board.
I understand that. I understand that.
Yeah,
I
yeah, it's
understand
gotta
that,
be
you know,
funded
but
or approved.
this is not just a contract for 533 million, is my point.
Yeah.
This is a contract for 533 million plus an option
Mhm.
for 15 additional train sets. And obviously, we don't have to do that.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
I recognize that, but the contract, the RFP is really, 533 million plus an option to do more, which means more money. Okay? All right. I just wanted to put that on the record.
Okay.
And then second of all, in your analysis, the memo to the board on page 9, you talk about subsequent NTPs. Obviously, those after NTP 1 and NTP 2 will be based on the price proposal plus escalation. What does that mean?
The escalation are indices that are in the contract that are agreed to be used to escalate the price that we're going to get with the proposal. So we use the CPI, various indices to increase the price that include inflation, consumer price index, et cetera. And I would like to go back to your previous point of the 15 additional train sets. We would have to have built all the way to Gilroy and tunneled through the mountain ranges there before I would be able to come to you and ask to execute that order.
That's a fair
So
point.
yeah, you're absolutely right that what we're asking them to submit proposals on, not executing a contract today, submit proposals on what your number would be for the additional 15 train sets.
I mean, and
then we'll make
obviously,
judgments on
the option has value, and that's why I wanted the board to be really cognizant of that. The option frankly has more value than this initial RFP.
Correct. It's more train sets. You're absolutely right. Tail wagging the dog sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. But if we don't build from here to Gilroy, we're not gonna buy 15 train sets.
Well, the whole discussion of buildings is even a different discussion, because I'm still concerned about rights of way. Whether, the rights of way have been done or not,
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
So, anyway, this whole thing about going back to page 9 of your memo about subsequent NTPs based on the price proposal plus escalation. So please walk me through that, Bruce. Let's assume that the time has come in which, okay, we might have to order 15 additional train sets. Are you saying that at that point, whoever wins this award will then submit a price proposal for us for 15 additional train sets, and that will also include escalation?
It depends on the timing.
Okay.
So we'll get a price from them, and they'll tell us that if they can continue this assembly line for these train sets, then here's your number.
Okay.
If I go away and start building somebody else's train sets and you come along, then that's going to be a different number.
Right.
If they've delivered all of my train sets and they've gone away and started doing other things, and then a few years later I say, hey, I still got these options active, that's a different number. And you all may say technology for high-speed train sets is about a 7-year cycle. Every 7 years you get a new version. So you all may say, we need to go out to bid and we're not going to execute this option. We're just not going to do it. We know we have the option. We saw their numbers. We want to see what else is out there that can meet our requirements. And you can tell us release another RFP for the additional 15 train sets.
All right, let me ask you a devil's advocate question, because that's the way I learn. Let's assume, and that's another question over the U.S. employment plan, and I'm talking here in my former role as an employment training analyst when I was a baby lawyer. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that the U.S. employment plan benchmarks have not been met. Do you think that you ought to, does the options, if they have not met those benchmarks, are these people who get this money from us still entitled to an option?
That's coming up in a future slide.
Okay, all right,
So,
then I'll hold my question for then, thank you.
Yeah. I want to give you the Bruce answer. There's a Bruce answer, and then there's.
Frankly, more interested in the Bruce answer.
No.
Thank you, Director.
No.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Please go forward.
Okay. Next slide, please. So evaluation criteria. We'll have a general proposal review for responsiveness, pass fail, financial capacity, and then the best value evaluation. The weighting is 60% price and 40% technical. The price includes capital delivery costs of the train set, spares, driving simulator, and the operational costs for the maintenance and the midlife overhaul. So we will do an evaluation of these things to select the best proposer. And it's compiled this way to try and get the best whole life costs for the train sets. So including the maintenance for 30 years, that's going to be done by, we expect, represented workers under the conventional RLA, and railroad retirement system. We've asked them for a price now so that we can better forecast our rolling stock costs. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chairman, would you prefer that we hold our questions till the completion of the entire presentation?
I think it's helpful sometimes to ask them as they come up, because then he's not flipping back and forth. So go ahead,
Just
Director Shane.
Real quick, the 60% price and 40 technical, just as a layperson, to me, the technical is as important as the price. So why not the 50-50 or even technical more?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of debate within our organization about exactly this issue. The whole life cost of the train sets is very important to us, along with the 40% technical is very important to us. The train sets have to be able to perform in a way that meets all of our requirements. And because this is we're considering 30 years of maintenance that has a significant impact on our life cycle costing. But I could get you more, information.
From what
on
you're
how we
saying, it's
determine.
all the more reason for technical.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I could get you the reasoning behind why it's 60-40. But that's where we've arrived.
I'm sure
because the
there's
life cycle
reasoning. I
costing-
just.
Yeah, it's a 30-year, whole life maintenance for the train sets. And they must meet our technical requirements.
Yeah.
And this is only a judgment for the RFP. So we're pricking the proposer that 60-40 technical, 60 price, 40 technical is where we arrived as a group.
So just to clarify then, can you just tell us, we have two qualified teams. I think we're probably all aware they build high-speed train sets in other countries. Can you tell us a little bit about then what's not the difference, but they both are qualified, they both have been building, or has one been building longer, or whatever it might be, but what about the two teams that we're looking at here?
As I mentioned.
Chair Richard, I do want to caution, we want to stick to getting this RFP out as opposed to the next issue that's coming in front of this board, which is picking between bidders. And I want to be careful not to make a record that would get us in trouble.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think really all we're trying to get to is the decision that these two finalists, these are two why are they qualified? Can you just tell us, can you tell us why are they both qualified?
Because they both showed through their statement of qualifications that they can meet our requirements for 220-mile-an-hour train set and all the propulsion systems, the things that are needed for us to meet all of our requirements that are in legislation and in other things and other regulatory requirements for high-speed train sets, including everything that's in the CFRs related to Tier 3, along with our speed requirements. So they've done both of these have shown us through evidence that they can meet our requirements through evidence and experience. They held up projects throughout the world where they've provided similar train sets. They've held up projects throughout the world where they are maintaining train sets.
Mhm.
So that's what helped them to meet to show us through evidence. And these evaluation selection committees are comprised of anywhere from 6 to 9 people. And we try and get representation from other local agencies throughout the state. So it's not just a group of high-speed rail people. I try and bring in the SJJPAs, CalSTA, Caltrain individuals to help us with the evaluation of these proposals so that we get different perspectives and experiences in delivering rail systems.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the conclusion is from these people who have reviewed this and all the information that both respondents are qualified.
That's correct. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick question on
Sure.
that, following that. So as a part of that RFQ process, was their performance evaluated as a part of that equation?
Yes, their performance on previous contracts was evaluated as part of the RFQ.
Right, thank you.
It was one of the evaluation criteria, absolutely.
Thank you, Henry. All right, go
Yes,
ahead.
yeah,
Yes,
one
go
other
ahead,
question.
Director.
Camacho, by the
Camacho,
way.
yeah, I know.
To help
Give me
out.
another
I
minute.
just
Give me a minute.
to help you out.
No.
In the evaluation criteria, it seems that there's a silence when we start looking at the participation of minority, women-owned small businesses in the state of California. Is this going to be, how are we going to rate that? And once we rate them, if we're going to rate them, how are we going to make sure that they're compliant?
Okay, that's coming up on a future slide. We'll talk about the small businesses. And compliance is a contract management issue that we will be working through, and I'll talk a little bit about how that works as well with the U.S. Employment Act slide that I have coming up. So let's go back to the presentation, please.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Okay, compliance with the Buy America provisions, responsiveness to the programmatic elements, and this is part of the evaluation criteria. So the FRA's Buy America statute requires final assembly of train sets from 100% domestic components. Based on dollar value, over 90% of high-speed train sets are available domestically, but certain items are still not produced in the U.S. And FRA waivers have been requested by others in the industry, including Amtrak quite a few years ago. And Brightline West just closed a public comment period on their waiver requests. So these waivers are not new to the industry, and they are part of the Buy America Act. So we can be fully compliant with the act with waivers. The authority proposers will be required to submit formal requests for their waivers. And we will work with the FRA on issuance of these waivers. And as I mentioned, we meet with FRA monthly on a variety of issues, and this will become one of them. And we also have workshops on our domestic sourcing plan and other things that we have implemented with FRA. And we'll issue an addendum to the RFP to reflect any granted waivers, and it will extend the proposal deadline if necessary. We don't believe that will be necessary because our close coordination with the FRA. And the point of the last 3 bullets is to say that we will get a price based on the waiver decisions from FRA. So I want to be clear that we will know, and there won't be any surprises around waiver request and FRA at the time after we execute this contract, because we'll know where we are. Next slide, please.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
On that slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Armistead,
Yeah.
so just on that point, so if you could just, because I just don't know, just admit.
Yeah.
Under the Buy America statute, there's two components to that. There's the location of the final assembly, and then there's the components.
Correct.
When you talk about getting a waiver, are you talking about both of those components potentially, or just both of those elements, or are you talking about just the components of the?
It depends on the manufacturer.
Okay, so there's a possibility that you could request, like one of these manufacturers could request a waiver to actually construct the train outside of the United States.
Yes, they could. Yes, they could.
Okay. So
that doesn't mean that'll be the guy that we
would
select.
happen. All right. I want to make sure we're clear on that. And
Absolutely.
I would say, for one, I would be very concerned about that. Even if the law requires it, allows it.
Well,
that it's one thing if you're talking about components, one part of one component, but when you're talking about the possibility of, I just want to just telegraph that out to folks to say, if you're thinking about that, I, for one, would have some serious concerns about that.
So, and it wouldn't, and I want to be careful not to go too far afield, because I'm only asking here for release of the RFP.
Right. No,
That's
I
all
get
I'm
it.
saying.
I get it.
So,
But also
let me say a few things about the information that's out in the public now, which there are some let me think about this. It's part of the process for folks who are currently asking for waivers. Some of them are asking for assembly and then technology transfer. Others are asking for just pieces and parts that will be, and then you bring those components here and they are assembled here. So it depends on the manufacturer. And I can't see a world where we would want to ask for a waiver to assemble the whole train, because that's not our experience. 90% of the components are available in this country. So the likely eventuality would be that the 10% we bring, and then final assembly would be done in this country.
Got it. Can I ask just a question about that in terms of, again, the qualifications for each of the two that have been qualified? In terms of assembly, what do we know about these two potential bidders in terms of where their current assembly facilities are located? And obviously, we may consider those down the line, but just out of curiosity for the.
Well, our U.S. employment plan will that we're asking them to submit will give us those details during the RFP process, and that will be graded as part of the RFP process.
Got it. So they would say where they plan to assemble these trains.
Yes,
Director Williams, if I could, just to, I want to get right to your question, I think, and hopefully I won't wander us into trouble. But the Alstom, which is one of the qualified firms, they have a manufacturing plant in upstate New York. Siemens has a manufacturing plant in Sacramento, and they also may working on an agreement of where they might manufacture Brightline trains if they get that contract. Brightline's a little bit in front of us right now. They haven't made a decision. It's the same two entities, but those are the current locations of where they manufacture trains.
So what's going to happen is we're going to have the answer to all these questions that we're asking when you are in receipt of their responses to the RFP.
That's correct. Yes, yes.
And I just wanted to point out, I think on your slide that we're requiring any waivers that they be limited waivers.
Absolutely.
I mean, no one's going to be asking to build a whole train set somewhere else.
No.
I mean, based on what our expectations are.
So Bruce,
And that's
who will
current
be our
business.
scoring committee on this?
We usually don't release that information publicly, but I will tell you, we have folks in-house and we do have other agencies throughout the state that are helping us with the ESC evaluations. We call it the Evaluation Selection Committee, and there's 9 on this one. think there's nine people on this one. Yeah, we have 9 people.
Okay, so
It's not just high-speed rail. They're rolling stock people who have experience with the shortlisted firms, because those firms also build for other railroad properties, as I mentioned, throughout the country.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to Henry's comment here, I was going to be good and wait until you're done. They're not, so I would. But on the evaluation, obviously there are things that even some of us could evaluate, but on the technical engineering side, we need expertise. But my question goes to making sure that there are no even perceived conflicts of interest. And I don't know who your evaluation committee is, but I'm hoping that neither Siemens nor Alstrom's former employees, no matter how long ago they were employees, will be on these evaluation committees. Because I want us to be as as clean as possible on possible issues of conflict or perceived conflict, or setting ourselves up to be on the defensive on any, because there are plenty of people around who can evaluate who have not worked for Siemens and Alstrom. So I just want to make that comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, to follow
Yes.
up on what Ms. Schenk has indicated, when Nancy and I drafted the conflict of interest laws and we presented it to the board, I remember clearly telling the board and the staff that these conflict of interest laws would apply not only to external stakeholders, but also internally to us as to how we guide ourselves in doing the business of high-speed rail. And by us, I mean staff, as well as obviously the board. So I'm expecting that we're going to be squeaky clean about that. And it's just not a conflict of interest. It's avoiding the appearance of impropriety, which is a higher burden of proof.
Yeah, and just to respond to both of those comments, we absolutely vet those ESC members for all these things. We appreciate you mentioning it.
I also think, just in line, I think in that we put that it's also always helpful to have people sign a statement that they're not aware of anything.
Yeah.
And I would just, that covers us as well,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, so I'm assuming that's.
Yeah, we have a
going to be
rigorous
done.
process
Okay.
where
And
that
signing
statement is
signing the
signed.
statement under penalty of perjury?
Yeah,
Yeah,
All right, because I know we did that for the conflicts laws.
right. That's.
it is, and it is part of our process.
Because we can't always expect to know everybody's complete background, even if
Yes.
you're doing a great vet.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's part of our process, and they make, we do it at a number of points in the process.
Right. And I may be getting ahead of myself here because I'm not even sure you're to this slide.
Mhm.
But in the scoring criteria, when we get to our small business DVBE goals, that hopefully there's a scoring criteria there.
There
And
is,
that
and
you'll-
I'll cover
thank you.
that in an upcoming slide.
Thank you. Well, yeah. So you're hearing clearly, I think, what the board is looking for.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So please continue.
Yep. Yeah, next slide. Speaking of small business, this is the scored element of our RFP. And the goals are as you see them there. We will withhold, as was asked earlier, any NTP. We have the ability to withhold an NTP or any portion if we're not satisfied with their performance. So as we're going along and we say that we see that they're not meeting their goals, we may want them to give us a remediation plan of some means that will be spelled out in the contract of how you're going to get back on track with your goals. The evaluation and scoring of the proposals, we will be scoring their approach, and we do this on the more recent RFPs that I've been involved in. We have reviewed their approach and the process to develop a DBE participation. And as part of this one, May 7th, we're having a fair where and it's a mandatory and it's required for the proposers to be there. And it's a DBE networking fair where, here are and Katrina's group is helping us out with that. I thought I saw Katrina here earlier. Yeah, Katrina's group is way out in front. She knows the capacity of the market in this regard. And she's doing the outreach to make sure that we get the right participation in the fair on May 7th. The proposers list of DBEs, MBE, micro businesses, disadvantaged veteran business enterprises, and disadvantaged business enterprises, their scopes and the percentages, along with their commitments and the small business communication plan. All those things are judged in the by the ESC during the review period. Next slide, please. Labor compliance, and the contract is going to require, of course, the contractor to comply with all applicable state and federal laws. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an MOU that's going to cover the 30-year maintenance period with labor organizations. So the build period will be something around in the order of 5 to 6 years. And then the maintenance period will extend 30 years. And so the performance of traditional rail work that includes inspection, maintenance, and repairs of the train sets and/or maintenance facilities will be covered by the RLA, Railway Labor Act, and Railroad Retirement. And we have an MOU with 13 unions that covers this work. Next slide, please. Labor compliance, the U.S. employment plan has been mentioned earlier. The proposers will be scored on their U.S. employment plan. Identification of U.S. locations, the final assembly, as was asked by, Mr. Williams is no longer, final assembly and the manufacturers of train sets, the descriptions of the jobs created or retained, compensation, benefits, medical, dental, retirement, sick pay, leave, and paid vacation, along with their workforce training plans, including the dollar commitment to workforce development, along with apprenticeship and training programs, outreach and recruitment of new hires, entry-level positions and disadvantaged workers, the approach to encouraging subcontractor and suppliers' participation in the U.S. employment plan. The contract will permit the authority to withhold NTP or portion thereof. The contract, if the authority is not satisfied with their efforts, and this is not a one and done, we will be reviewing these annually to ensure that they're adhering to the plan that we have scored and hired them on. Yes.
All right. I see that, that quote unquote, the remedy is to withhold issuance of an NTP if they don't, if they don't respect the goals of the small business program, if they don't respect the goals of the U.S. employment plan. But my question is, why do we have to wait till almost a whole year later to find out that they're not in compliance? And then we're forced to basically withhold the NTP. Can't we do some type of remedial action sooner and prevent the withholding of the NTP and kind of help them out along the way to you gotta comply?
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna, I note on page 1 of the RFP summary that was provided to the board, it says that, there's one, the permission to proceed with work on the NTP may be withheld. And then secondly, payment for preliminary submittals is dependent on the authority's satisfaction with the contractor's SP program plan submittal. I also just say less than an RFP matter, this is really a management matter.
Right.
And the board has been extremely clear with us on how important the small business participation is. I think the most recent example is on one of the design contracts that you guys just allowed us to extend to 100% design. We, in the case of that firm, implemented a correction plan that our management team is on every day, every week, every month. And we are reporting and monitoring how, in the case of that firm, they're coming up to the required participation. It's the same kind of thing that I think we would do here. You guys have made it very clear that the small business participation stuff is important. We are working with vendors to make sure they meet it, and we're monitoring it and following it in a way that we have not before. And where we have problems with it, we'll report to the board.
All right.
Let me just ask, Marta, is it all right if I ask?
Of course.
On that, we right now on the F&A committee get a report of our utilization every month. Is Brian gone? Right, Brian? So maybe we just tag on to that if on that report monthly, if there's if anybody's lagging or any problems with a contractor monthly.
I think
I mean, you would know
I would love to
this.
get the information as much as possible in real time. So that makes a
Okay.
lot of sense. And it's more proactive for us to really help out the contractor rather than wait a whole year later and say, hey, you didn't comply, so I'm going to withhold the NTP.
Right. Ryan, is that something that's
Yeah, I mean,
okay, or is it,
it's
or is it
if the
too
board
much?
wants it, it's okay. But I mean,
Because what she's saying is true. A lot of these are goals. People see them, they're like, yes, and then they kind of.
yeah. I mean, I've said this before. I just want to be clear on our professional services contracts. We are exceeding our.
I know that. Yeah.
The biggest
we're
challenge
great.
happens to be on the 3 construction contracts that take up the bulk of the expenditures we've made to date. And because those contracts have been delayed and taken time at cost increases, it's hard to keep up with the demand on the participation rate
I understand.
on those 3 big contracts. Life is different when we're done with those 3 contracts. And so I'm for, just like the board is for, monitoring where we are on these, managing them so that we're pushing the vendors to meet our expectations and reporting to the board on where we are.
Okay.
So
I
to
think
me,
that-
it's
I
wherever
think
you
that-
guys see it appropriate, we'll do.
I think Ms. Miller's idea is an excellent one, so your idea about getting the information, if we can't do it on a monthly basis, even quarterly.
Yeah. Okay. Timely. How about that?
Mr.
Okay, I
Ennis?
didn't need to have you stand up. All right.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, we do have some of our detailed F&A reporting. We focus on the PowerPoint, but we do have a more detailed report, contracts and purchase order expenditure report. And that does have some statistics on small business utilization by individual
so you're-
contracts. So happy to focus on that at the next F&A meeting.
Thank you,
Okay,
Brian.
I'd like to continue with my questions on this issue. Thank you, Ms. Miller. The question that I have is, yes, I understand that you have the authority to withhold the NTP if someone is not complying. Do you have the authority to renege on the option?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's at the discretion of the
don't-
board.
okay,
I
right,
mean,
you don't-
it's
right,
our
okay,
option.
okay,
If we say don't execute, we're not going to execute it.
All right, okay.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask maybe a clarifying question about the option that I think is it my understanding that I'm looking at council, but I'm also looking at you, Bruce,
Yes, sir.
is what the option does is allow us to procure additional train sets from the winning
Right.
manufacturer without having to go out and do another RFP.
That's correct.
We don't have to do that. We can just say, thank you for your service. We're going to go out and do another RFP.
Right.
So
Yes.
that's the advantage that I think we gain if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I think the way that you can always think of an option is the option is to the benefit of the one receiving it, not the one who's giving it.
Right.
And so that's what's happening here. We're the recipients of an option. We don't have to execute it. So they really can't say, wow, we've got 15 more train sets we're going to build.
No.
It's at our option.
All right.
Correct.
My next question is based on page 12 of your presentation, Bruce.
Okay.
And that is part of the evaluation criteria in terms of labor compliance and how basically whoever wins this contract deals with labor organizations. And you say that the contract will require the contractor to assume the obligations of an MOU with signatory labor organizations. But to me, the language after that seems to be asking for a labor workforce with regard to traditional rail work, however that is defined. But it says it includes inspection, maintenance, and repair of train sets and or maintenance facilities. Okay, so for that purpose, we will have a labor workforce. So the question that I have is, will we have a labor workforce for the actual manufacturing of the train sets?
Well, there will have to be a labor workforce for manufacturing. This MOU covers the operating period And those employees fall under the Railway Labor Act and.
But it's my understanding from the people that came during public comment representing Siemens, that Siemens in Sacramento has refused to organize. That's what I heard.
So I think that I'm going to guess we have to be careful about this. I mean, what we're doing is we're putting out an RFP. The RFP is going to be very clear as to what Siemens is offering and providing in response to this RFP, those things that we're talking about. I think that's correct.
Right.
And that's at what point we will make a decision. But in terms of what the conditions are at any existing Siemens facility is not necessarily what we're dealing with.
I
here
withdraw my
on this
question, Mr.
RFP.
Chairman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Scusia. Listen, I try, it's a long day, so. Thank you, Martha.
Yeah. I think I got one more slide. Yes. One more slide. Next slide, please.
It's very difficult here, I can tell you.
Next slide, please. Okay,
There was a
just-
little humor right there, Bruce. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to run through these key dates really quickly. Hopefully, I'll get your approval today to release the RFP. We'll then be releasing that RFP sometime this month. We'll have the Fast Track Networking Fair for the small businesses on May 7th. The addendums, if needed, summer 2024, proposals due in fall, and I'd like to see them in August just to keep us moving in a way that's expedient. And then the board approval to award the contract and issue NTP 1 and 2 in the fourth quarter of this year. And this will keep us on schedule with a lot of the things we need to do in order to meet our grant requirements. So it's really important that we get these guys under contract this year so that they can get going. And the timeline that I've laid out here is, I will tell you, it's ambitious. It's ambitious, but we can do it. It's not unrealistic.
Yeah.
So today is very important to us.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Armistead. Director Williams.
I apologize that I had to step out for a minute, but I just wanted to see if the question was asked and answered about the scoring. Because I agree with the commenters who came before us. I think we should recognize the long history that we've had, this board and this project has had with labor. And that that should continue to be reflected in the manufacturing of these train sets. And what is there a way for us to add additional scoring to reflect that issue?
Can you go to slide 11, please? And then 10, let's start with 10. 10 is the, well, no, 11 is better, I'm sorry. So this is the scoring for, these are the criteria for how we will review. Yeah. Next slide, please. U.S. Employment Act, I'm sorry.
Well,
One more.
before that is that one, the labor organization.
Yeah, the question is about scoring, basically giving a higher weighted score for a manufacturer that has an existing labor
Yeah,
agreement.
so can I just,
Best place to look, I'm sorry,
business started.
is Chair Williams, is the memo to the board at pages 6 and 7 that actually lay out scoring.
Okay.
And in there, you will see that for the USEP, there's a 20-point score as part of the technical
But how do we
provisions,
change
and
that
the
scoring?
small business is
Right.
at 30 points.
Can we change it?
Yeah. We want that to be a
Yes.
higher number.
You could decide they want to split,
for-
instead
so-
of 20,
So
30,
just
they could go
contextually,
25,
for
20.
example, I just wanted to flag that the small business and the U.S. employment response, the EP response, is a combined 50 points out of the 400 technical score.
Correct.
That's about 13% of the score. If you wanted
We can
to,
make it higher if we want.
yeah, you guys
can make
can
it higher.
direct us what you
Okay.
want to do. You just got to take it from somewhere else. But one example for, again, it's 30-20 in that category now. It could be 25-25. It could be 30-20 the other way. I mean, so the board can direct us in that if they want.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean,
But-
yeah, so the answer would be this board, as part of the resolution you adopt, could ask for a change. I think, I would encourage that, because this is so technical and we are required to meet a lot of statutory requirements, that the direction might be to staff to come up with a way to bolster the scoring of something like the USEP without perhaps absolutely directing it.
Right.
And losing points on some technical things staff has decided is very critical.
I mean, it
for-
seems technical's technical. I mean, that's a lot more black and white as opposed to, there's other sections that are more, I guess, fuzzy for lack of a better word. But it seems that and I'm not speaking for them, all the board, because I don't know what everybody thinks, but I think there's some members on this board who do want to see a higher score placed on whatever vendor, willingness to work with organized labor.
Right.
So it's how do we get there? Either by board direction or, how do we change the scoring before you put it out?
Yeah,
Are-
there was just a good graphic up that showed the board memo and the scoring, and then a few, I think it's a page or two before that is in your memo, it shows the scoring for each of the, this graphic, and so
Oh, no,
this
I
is
see
our
it.
entire.
I've seen the scoring.
Yeah.
I'm just
And if
saying,
you
what I'm
want to
at-
just
what I'm
mark
at-
that up and tell us what you want.
No,
No,
I think.
she said,
Are you
lawyer said
comfortable
no.
with Alicia's language?
Yeah, I mean, to Alicia's
Okay.
point, sorry to be talking all over the place, Mr. Chairman. But yeah, I mean, there's a, as I read this, it looks like it would be it would be scored under the technical proposal,
Yes.
right? So there's 175 points maximum total. There's two ways you could do it, it seems to me, and I don't know whether the 775 is the number. If that went to 180 and those additional 5 points was added to the draft US employment plan, and it was clear that that plan included whether or not they had an MOU with, a labor organization, right? That would, push the weighting on that particular element without detracting from the others. Whether that is legally possible and meets technical requirements or other, we don't know that. So we couldn't on the fly suggest what we think that weighting shift needs to be, but I do think it would be important, that the motion, when it's made, would be with direction to come, whatever,
I mean, I
your
think
words.
the resolution would say staff is directed to amplify the weight of the USEP score.
Okay.
And that asks staff to take care of that.
Okay, so,
Consistent with the board's direction at its
so the
meeting.
board, here's what
today's
I'd like to suggest. Do you want to make anything more clear in terms of what you're looking for that in the change to the scoring? We're then going to take a 10-minute break and we're going to get management together and then come back with their response to what we're asking for, so that we actually have the change in the scoring today so that we can make the resolution and give you the ability to move forward on the release of the RFP.
Can we just make it 2 minutes? Just because we have some timing issues with.
No, we don't. Well, we need something, we need something for them to tell us if it's easier that way. I want to make sure management's on board with what they're hearing. And and just come back to us. If it takes 2 minutes or 5 minutes, that's all fine also.
Just give
They're
us a couple
working it
minutes.
out now.
What we're going to do is we're going to have a 5-minute recess. Meeting's back to order. Director Williams, please
I
present the results of the conversation.
The proposal
Yes.
is that we would amend the motion before the board to include the direction to staff to increase the draft employment plan score by 50%.
Okay.
And ensure that it includes that part of the scoring of that item includes whether or not the manufacturer has a labor agreement for manufacturing, inspection and maintenance.
Manufacturing.
And assembly.
And it's assembly, meaning manufacturing. So assembly, inspection and maintenance. Because the question that Director Escute had was whether the item that you pointed out, and I can't remember which one it was.
It was in the slide.
Yeah, included,
Manufacturing.
whether it
or
was just
assembly.
inspection and maintenance of the train sets as a verse, as a, you know, as opposed to the assembly of those train sets.
Okay.
So
We just wanted
that-
to be clear
yeah.
that, yeah,
That additional language in the resolution is going to either bring on protests or cause us to lose one or two bidders on this. It's more than.
Can I just clarify? So I just want to
Yeah.
be clear on how we're applying certain standards.
Okay.
So first of all, we entered an MOU with labor groups last November, November 2023. It applies to both bidders. It applies to both bidders. Okay, they have to be consistent with the MOU that we, the authority, executed. So that's a requirement, right? In this RFP, which is separate from that, in this RFP, we're also asking them to tell us what elements of the U.S. employment plan, how they're implementing elements of the U.S. employment plan, and answering specific questions for us about where the jobs are, where they're manufacturing, what the training is, what the apprenticeship programs available are, all of these questions. This scoring element relative only to the RFP is to score their response to that USEP question. So I would separate the MOU from this because the MOU is done and it's a requirement on both. Here, I would just say on the USEP score, the board is directing us to increase that weight from what it is now by 50%. And I think that gets to what you want and will avoid the protest issue that Alicia is raising.
Does that agreement with those organizations that's over here, does that require that the workforces of these two bidders be unionized?
It does not.
It does
No,
not.
but
Okay, that's
here's
the
what it
point.
does. Here's what it require under the
Point.
federal acts that govern that MOU. It requires them to follow the processes for representation.
What does
So
that mean? What does that mean?
when under
In the context of their workforce.
under the Labor Act and other things, there are requirements for how employees who want to be represented. There's requirements on the vendor and the contractor for how they allow that to occur. That's part of the MOU that we did last November. That our contractors have to follow those requirements under the law. That's in the MOU. The USEP scoring that's in this RFP does not speak to the MOU separately. What Bruce was pointing out in the maintenance of trains, for example, is that is traditional rail work, again, under the MOU, that both bidders are going to have to follow the MOU on. But again, it's separate from the scoring of the USEP in this RFP. It's a different matter.
No, but if I could ask counsel, hearing all this, what does that mean in the context of these two bidders and their workforces?
I mean, it means this USEP requires them to provide us all kinds of information to answer your question. What are they doing? Where are they doing it? How are they, paying and benefits and everything else? It's not requiring union presence in their facility. It is requiring them to respond to us in every way, and that will allow us to score based on your direction and the policy direction.
But based on
their
the
impacts.
proposed or suggested amendment right now, it would require a workforce. And you're saying that would be a problem.
A bridge too far. Yes.
Why? Legally versus
Legally.
good idea, bad idea.
No, legally, it could bring forward a protest because we are mandated to go out and find the most competitive procurement processes we can. And we are trying to find in every one of our procurements, right, the most possible bidders. And we are sort of taking direction from public comment and now limiting our procurement process to a very limited situation. And that's going to cause us trouble. Really, what we want to do is
legally
most
or
competitive.
or perception? I mean, I'm trying to understand
Probably
what's the
both,
legal
but it could
issue
certainly open us up to a protest.
to a protest. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I understand what you're saying to Brian. I'm just trying to get to a point where, I mean, earlier Director Williams made a comment with respect to how this organization has a history, a very good history in working with labor. And we certainly don't want to get involved in any business's internal, I guess, machinations, whatever's going on in their organization. However, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if we're hearing things or if there's something that's going on there, I mean, I don't know how we get to a point where we evaluate that in our decision making. Because I know it affects my decision making. And I think what we're trying to accomplish is, okay, well, how do we deal with that in the context of in this case, an RFP and scoring, et cetera?
Right.
And I don't
And
even think that's quite the answer. However, what I'm just trying to get to is today we're just releasing an RFP, but at some point we're going to be making a decision. And I think if we don't deal with this elephant in the room, it could be a much different discussion a few months from now. So
and-
how do we deal with that?
I think the USEP, which, the federal government has really created, and it's a voluntary plan. We aren't required to use it, but I think we've all embraced. It's a really good way to measure and answer all the questions you guys are asking.
No, it does not.
the
The
goal.
USEP only addresses the issue of obviously benefits and training opportunities and everything for hopefully a very diverse workforce. But I think the issue that at least I identified on page 12 of the slide presentation from Bruce was that the MOU with signatory labor organizations seemed to be limited to basically that type of traditional rail work, which I said, I don't know what that means, but traditional rail work that includes inspection, maintenance, and repair. It does not seem to include manufacturing.
Correct.
Doesn't.
That is correct.
It does not, right. And so you're saying, you're basically telling Director Williams to basically, in a way, drop the question of manufacturing and not make that part of the motion, much less make it part of a scoring criteria.
What I'm saying is the MOU requirement is not a requirement on the bidders. The MOU requirement is what is an execution we made with labor organizations last fall. And what it says is we will work, the folks who submit to do work for this organization will follow federal standards on labor standards and other things that are very clear on how facilities, plants, workforce can become represented. And they have to follow that. So that's the MOU that this organization entered with 13 labor groups across the country. It does not apply to manufacturing trains.
Okay,
It does apply to everything else.
I understand.
And so what do we want to do in an RFP? So in the RFP, what we thought the best additive thing was make sure this board is as informed as possible about the labor relationships with the organizations by voluntarily, this organization saying, we're going to apply the U.S. employment plan question set. They have to answer that question set. We will score that question set. And now under Mr. Williams' direction, we will score it higher. We'll score that question set. And on an annual basis, we will track how they're doing on those things. By the time we come back to this board to then say, 6 months from now, do you want to release this contract? You guys will know, all the answers to their questions they provided us, whether or not a specific plant is labor or not labor. If it's only on manufacturing, that's something that they got to work out between they and the labor groups. But what our MOU says for traditional work, you got to follow all the statutes on that. USCP plan, you got to tell us what you're doing, how you're doing it, and we'll be as informed as possible by the time we ask you guys to let the actual contract go. So that's just how we try to put as much together as we could for you guys to be as informed as possible. I think the concern that Alicia is expressing that we discussed internally as a staff was some concern if we went too far and sort of compelled representation everywhere, because even the MOU doesn't compel it. It says you got to follow statutes that allow for it. If we did that, there was a concern that we would be open to a protest, or it would not be as open and clean a competitive process. But Let me ask this question, Mr.
Kelly. Let me ask this question. I get it. I get the concern and I get being that prescriptive. And in reading back through this, for example, and I'm on page 5 of the memo, on page 5, top of page 5, under number 2, it said the description should include minimum requirements for each job skill category, including the extent to which the plan is likely to produce or retain long-term employment in skilled or trade labor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's already in there.
Yeah, they got to
That's going to be scored.
They have to answer it.
One of the competing manufacturers might say the way that we're going to produce or retain long-term employment in skilled or trade labor is in partnership with a labor organization with whom we have an agreement to do so. They could say that. One could say that, and one would not be able to say that if they didn't have that, right? And then we would score it based on that information. So we're not prescribing. I get it.
Thank you.
We're not prescribing that you have to have an MOU and we're going to give you more points if you have an MOU. But it's implicit in here that that could be one of the reasons offered by the competitor, the competing company, as to why they're going to meet that.
Our
And we can evaluate that.
Oh, yes. And
How
our,
are you going to meet this?
our expectation is, I mean, council, kill me if I go to. No. I just want to say that our expectation is that entity that answers the question most thoroughly will score higher.
Correct. Right.
That's fair.
Right?
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
that's exactly what we're
And
doing.
going past that, you know, we're gonna have a problem with public contract.
Yeah, I think that
I
we're,
got it. I
favor.
got
we're
it.
as
So
far
I
as
think
we can go right now.
then I would clarify my motion, and I'm looking to my colleagues, just is without the last part that I added effectively to
So if I-
say, we would ask staff to readjust the scoring to increase that item by 50%.
Yes.
We can do
Period.
that.
And
And
that's
we
it.
would just add a line to the resolution, you know, which right now you guys are directing us to issue this. And it would just, a line could say the board directs staff to increase the draft USEP score by 50%.
So is that a motion?
Is that a motion? Yeah.
The
No,
motion
she's
was
not
both
making the
things, right?
motion, but,
If we're
okay.
ready, if
Yes,
you're
we're ready
to
for
We're
the
ready.
I will
motion.
make the motion.
Okay.
Second.
A second by Director Escutia.
Yeah.
I got it. I got it. We're together. All right, Secretary, please call the roll.
Shank, Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho, Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea, Senior.
Oh, you can drop off the senior. You make me sound too old. Right.
Oh, SR at the last second. I thought I'll add it in there.
Yeah, I'm okay with moving this RFP forward. I'm not necessarily okay
Wait,
based on our discussion on,
Votes on the motion.
or just on the motion itself
Motion
to
change it.
adjust. Yes.
Director Gometti, Director Escutia,
Aye.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen.
Abstain.
This motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 4, which is CEO report.
So, yeah.
That was a motion just on Mr. Williams's basically the motion. We still have not voted to release this RFP.
I'm going to move the staff motion, if I may, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm jumping.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Director Shank,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho, Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Qualified, yes.
Director Gometti, Director Escutia,
Aye.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen.
Aye.
Close report.
Yes.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. You ready, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna move expeditiously through this. In fact, I'm just gonna tell if it's okay, I want to tell the guys in the booth, I'm gonna skip the video on this and just get through this more quickly. My CEO report, Mr. Chairman, is first to inform you and the board that we extended the construction management project or contract for our PCM in the Central Valley on CP 2-3 to be consistent with the duration of that construction contract. No changes made to the scope of the work, but the extension of the contract goes now through September 30th of 2025. And then skipping to page 5 of the presentation. I'm sorry, let me go back one to page 4. I'm going to come back to this board at our May hearing and go through in more detail a substantive look at other upcoming procurements we have to get in, advance the project in a way that we are advancing along consistent with our schedule for both completing the 119 and getting into operations on the 171. We're going to talk about the progressive design build traction power system, the rail train control and communication system procurements, as well as later in the year, the CMGC construction of the track and OCS that will all be coming before the board. Again, in May, I'll go through a more detailed schedule. I otherwise just wanted to inform the board, as you heard from Bruce Armistead earlier, on May 7th, we are doing a major industry outreach networking day at the DGS, that's the Department of General Services Ziggurat building in West Sacramento, to go through both our upcoming procurements that the authority will move forward on and provide an opportunity for small businesses to interact and network with larger prime contractors on some of the upcoming work. Again, that contracting opportunities and procurement updates to be discussed will include our upcoming RFP and RFQ schedule, our track and system schedule, Merced and Bakersfield extensions, station and facility design and construction of traction power systems, including solar and battery energy solar systems. And again, the idea here is to talk to industry about what's coming up and make sure there's an opportunity for industry to interact amongst themselves on these issues. With that, I'm happy to pause, answer any questions, or conclude my presentation.
Any questions for the CEO? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very quickly on item number 5, the Finance and Audit Committee report for today. These numbers are as of February the 29th. The authority had approximately $3 billion in cash available. The bulk of that is from Proposition 1A and cap and trade, and the bulk of that is from cap and trade. The April 4th Treasurer's Office bond sale netted about $400 million to the authority from Proposition 1A bonds. The estimated cap and trade proceeds from the February auction are 325.5, which is the second largest auction proceeds realized by the authority to date. The capital outlay budget for the month of February, 71.5 million paid out or in expenditures for design build contracts. The contingency summary at the end of February, there was still approximately $1 billion remaining in contingency specifically for the construction packages. The labor for the month of February, the average workers on site, 1,247 per day. Utility locations, 34 locations were completed. That brings us to 70% of the utility locations in the 119 miles are completed. 15% are in progress and 15% have not started. And in terms of right-of-way, there are only 26 parcels remaining out of 2,287 that were required. And that's the end of that report. Any questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Sure. One more comment from our CEO.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to take a minute because we transitioned quickly to the CEO report, but I wanted to first thank the board for a very good conversation about the RFP for the train sets. I also want to just say to the board and to the folks who are listening or paying attention that is the culmination of months and months and months of work from our staff, particularly in the Division of Rail Operations and our procurement team. And they've just, I just want to acknowledge their hard work to get that procurement done, to keep us on schedule to deliver this program. And it is a collective effort that is truly admirable from where I sit. And I just wanted to acknowledge the great work of our team collectively on that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Are there any board comments beyond what we've already had today? Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to go into a closed session. I don't believe that this will last for much more than maybe 30 minutes, perhaps less. So I will come back and report any things that occurs in the closed session that's reportable to the public. So with that, we will now move into closed session. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Board of Directors of the California High-Speed Rail Authority has just finished its closed session for today, April the 11th, 2024. We have nothing to report. We will look forward to seeing you at our next board meeting. The meeting today is now adjourned.